Welcome to Speaking of That, where communicating with youth becomes an art. With over 46 combined years of experience, my daughter and I share what we've learned about connecting with youth through laughter, learning, and especially heart. And along the way, you'll discover why your story matters.
Question number 1. I've noticed that when I share some huge dramatic story, people nod. But when I tell a tiny, ordinary story, like something that happened in line at the grocery store, that's when I see people really leaning in. Do you think that those small moments connect with people more?
Yes.
That's a good question, yeah.
Yeah, that is definitely a good question. And it is what I call the so what factor.
Okay.
So what? You climb Mount Everest? So what?
Mm-hmm.
You drove across the country? So what? And if you don't build that so what into things, people just lose interest. It's like back in the day when somebody would go on vacation and you watch their carousel slides and halfway through or quarter of the way through, you're like, I hate this.
Yeah.
You know? And so you have to build in. So if you can build into a big story, the so what factor for somebody, they'll lean into that. But the thing is about those small everyday things, everybody has experienced them and they're like, oh yeah, I remember that happening. I didn't get that point out of it, but that's really cool that you did.
Yeah.
And I think we were talking about this yesterday with some TikTok video where somebody goes, I guess we all had the same experience in life.
Yeah, that's so true. And I feel like, because every single person has learned some kind of lesson in life.
Right.
Every single person has learned like, oh, I shouldn't have, said that to that person, or, oh, I should do that next time, something. We've all learned lessons.
Shouldn't have tried the cinnamon challenge.
Yeah, exactly. And so we all learn lessons through all these different, events and stuff. And I think we forget that a lot of people are also looking for those same kind of lessons and having similar experiences where exactly like you're saying, if I hear a story of someone climbing Mount Everest or doing some amazing thing, it's like, wow, that's really incredible. Look at them.
Right.
But it's more difficult to put yourself into that story.
Right. We used to, we still do work with a guy that was formerly a gang member. And he would tell these big gang stories when we first started working with him. And it just didn't have the impact because the majority of the kids in the audience were probably never going to be in a gang.
Right.
It was interesting to hear, but it didn't have the punch and the so what factor. But then when he started talking about being on a baseball team and how that made them feel and that he got into sports for a little bit, all of a sudden the kids were like, oh my gosh, I'm into sports. I like that feeling. I like when kids, lift me up over their shoulders or when I hit a home run or when I make a basket, or that's the majority of my sports analogies. And so that really brought it home. So the so what factor is what you're looking for. And you can find those so what factors a lot of times in the everyday stuff that happens to you.
Yeah, that is so true. I love that. All right, next one. I have so many stories from my life, but I get stuck wondering which ones are actually worth putting on a stage. Some feel too small, some feel too personal, and I'm never sure which one will actually matter to someone else. How do I figure out which personal story is the one to share? Well, that's a good one.
Yeah. Do you want to take that one?
Go ahead, and then I'll...
Yeah. Which personal story to share? If you feel uncomfortable telling a story, do not tell it.
That part.
Because it will come off and they will know that it feels awkward. You feel like you're sharing parts that, you shouldn't share. There was a part when I used to talk about just growing up in a family with, a lot of addiction stuff, where there was some abuse that took place between my mom and dad. And I felt uncomfortable saying that. And after about the fifth or sixth time, I'm like, I'm not telling that part anymore. It just doesn't work for me. The kids don't need to know that. It makes me feel uncomfortable. It makes my family look bad. So I totally, cut that piece out.
Yeah.
Too personal. And so, And so I don't think there's a story that's too small. I think they all, you can work it up to have some type of impact. Like you tell a story about going to a haunted house and somebody getting scared and passing out. And, that story hits. And it's just the going to a haunted house story.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That is so true. And I think exactly like you're saying, Yeah, no story is too small, especially if there's something in there where you learned a lesson. Even if it's some story like, oh man, when I was in 7th grade, I had a crush on this person and my best friend stole them. That's a story that there are so many lessons you could learn in there, right? And there's so many different messages that you could pull from that and share. And that's such a tiny little thing that probably, a bunch of us have experienced that.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'll say this though, because they're like, how do I figure it out?
Uh-huh.
One thing you definitely could do is just talk to the people around you. You don't always need to workshop a story in a presentation.
Mm-hmm.
And so talk to your friends, talk to your family, share those kinds of little stories. You can even tell them like, hey, I'm working on a story because I want to be a public speaker. Like, could I share this story with you? And figure out which ones resonate with people.
Right.
And understand, like, especially, when I first started public speaking, I had one person that I was kind of workshopping my stories with. Well, unbeknownst to me at the time, this person did not have a good taste for stories or, what the majority of people like.
Right.
And so I was workshopping it and I ended up with a good amount of material that really didn't work. So workshop it with different people. Don't always think that your one closest confidant is going to be the best, person to workshop with. But talk to different friends, talk to different family members, different people in whatever communities you're a part of. And most of your friends, if they're good friends, will be willing to hear your story.
Yeah. And I have found too that the more details, not overly load them, but details you can put into a story really help. So when I'm talking about, the bicycle story, I put in cute pink wall mark bike. How many of you had that bike? I see all these hands go up. Now I know I own them.
Right.
Because they're like, I had that bike. I know that bike.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, I had an experience like that on that bike. I remember the starfish. So those little things, those little details, you got to figure out the right level.
Mm-hmm.
If I put in there, the bike was $79.99 and it had 2 white tires, it's too much detail. But just enough to get people locked into what you have to say.
That section in the Youth Speaker Blueprint is actually one of my favorites.
Is it?
Yes, yeah. I love that because for me, I had a difficult time figuring out which details were too much and which ones really added to the story.
Right.
So yeah, that chapter, when we were, putting that chapter together was one of my favorites for sure.
Oh, awesome.
All right, last question for today. I've told stories on stage before where I felt like I was just talking. Oh yeah, I've been there.
Yes.
Like people heard me but didn't feel anything. And then there have been times where I shared something and I could see it land like they were right there living it with me.
Right.
What's the difference between telling a story and truly connecting with people through it? That's a good one.
Yeah. It's the audience and the setting and all of that. And so you have to realize, and this is where you get experience. If I'm going to be speaking at a conference and I'm the morning speaker, I know everybody's going to be energized. If I'm the speaker after everybody's eaten lunch and they're picking up plates and stuff like that, there's not going to be the same type of energy. So I may not make that connection. Or if I'm the last speaker on the last day, people are already thinking about going home. So you can't always read your audience for the information that you're going to get back unless you run it through that filter. Okay, I'm morning speaker, a lot of energy. Here we go. And you're going to see that your audience are going to lock into it. Just like when we present Monday morning presentations, kids are just sitting there with their eyes barely open. So would we go, oh, our information isn't any good? No, because it works Thursday afternoons. It works, Tuesday morning, Tuesday mid-morning. It works Friday afternoon. And just got to know your audience and be careful on the feedback that you get.
Right.
Because, they may be full. They may be digesting cake. They may be looking for a second cup of coffee, or they may be taking notes. Yeah.
Yeah, that's so true. And then I think the other thing, too, is like, and one of my other sections I really liked in the Youth Speaker Blueprint was the body language and tone. And I have found that sometimes a small change in my tone, which I think is that's where my issue was with this problem the person's describing.
Okay.
My issue was my tone. I can have a tendency to have almost a monotone of what my tone level is.
Okay.
And so sometimes I'll get to where I feel like, this story feels like it's dragging on, you know? And then somewhere right there, I'll watch and see, okay, that's kind of the point where it feels like it starts to drag, and I'll change something right there. A little thing in the tone. My haunted house story, I had a part where I would say, like, you know, when she opened her eyes, all she saw were all of these clowns. And then I changed it to kind of like, when she opened her eyes, all she saw were all of these clowns, you know, and just a little change in tone like that can really make it feel like people are hearing you, really connecting with you. And instead of just, you know, listening to the words. So yeah, I would say, you know, with any of that kind of stuff, if you're ever noticing like, I don't know about this, change a little something. And that's another thing that I like about the Youth Speaker Blueprint is you kind of have, oh, these are the sections I could change, right? Oh, the body language. Oh, the tone. Oh, the joke, the detail, the this, the that, right? All of that kind of stuff. You can play around with those and it can transform a story.
Totally can. And it keeps it fresh for you.
Yeah, that's true.
And so I've been changing a couple of little stories and adding a couple of things and pulling a couple of things out, and it keeps it fresh for me.
Yeah.
And I love it.
Yeah, and that's true. And that's the other thing too, is like, if you feel like I'm loving telling this story, I'm into it, right? Your audience probably will be too. When you feel like, oh, I don't know, the story feels like it kind of drags every time, the audience is probably feeling that way too. So if you are feeling like that, I would take that as a big sign that there is something you need to change or adjust in your story. For sure. Yeah. Awesome. Well, thank you guys so much for listening today. And again, if you want to ask a question about being a public speaker, drop it in the comments, email us, let us know, and maybe we will answer your question. All right, you guys.
Your story matters. I love that.
Yay.
It does matter.
It sure does.
Get out there and tell it.